I used to deliver for Uber Eats. It was late at night and I was picking up an order from some fast food place in Wilmington, North Carolina, and delivering it to a house about 20 minutes away. I often did late-night deliveries and Uber rides because the pay was higher, and I could knock out more deliveries and rides without traffic. I was already en route to the address, leaving the more populated residential area of Wilmington and heading toward the quieter part with all the forests and farms. Most of the roads there were pitch black, void of any other cars at that late hour. I turned off the main road onto a side road with a dead-end sign. This was where the directions were taking me, where the address was. I was brought to the last house on this road. The lights to almost every house on the stretch were off. It was just pitch black, even the house I was supposed to be delivering to. I had to keep my car headlights on just to see and to avoid tripping on anything. I also used my phone's flashlight to navigate my way to the porch. I'm not lying when I say there wasn't a single light on. I could even feel the overgrown grass rubbing against my shins as I walked to the front door. It didn't feel right. I pressed the doorbell, but didn't hear a ring, so I knocked. The customer had selected the contact delivery option, which meant I had to physically hand off the food to him or her. I messaged the customer, letting them know I was at the front door, and asked if they could confirm the address. They read the message right away and responded, "Give me a second." I replied, "Okay," and saw they read it. I waited in the dark, looking at the windows of the house, expecting a light to turn on. I was starting to think, there's no way this is the right house. I followed up again, asking the customer to type out their address. They started typing, and it took a while before they finally sent a message saying, "I see you. You're at the right house." The next thing I realized was that there were no cars anywhere. This didn't make sense. I asked the customer to confirm what kind of car they saw outside. They replied, "I see your light." That pretty much confirmed I was at the right house, but it didn't make the situation any less sketchy. I started to inch away from the door, not wanting to be standing right at it when they opened it. But the door never opened, no matter how many times I messaged the customer on the Uber Eats app. I started to suspect it was some kind of scam to get free food. Then I heard a voice come from outside in the darkness. It was a male voice calling, "Over here." I started waving my flashlight all around, trying to reveal whoever had said that. I called out, "I'm leaving the food on the front porch." I didn't know who I was talking to, nor could I see anyone. I was terrified, thinking I was about to be attacked. I walked back to my car, trying not to draw attention by running. When I got to my car, I heard a distinct hissing sound, which I immediately recognized as the sound of air leaking from a slashed tire. I took a look and saw that both tires on the left side of my car had been slashed and were leaking air. I could only assume the tires on the right side had also been slashed. I got into the car and locked the doors. Panic started to set in as all 4 tires showed low pressure warnings on the dash. I was torn between calling the police and waiting in the car or making a run for it into the darkness to a nearby house. I was about to pick the second option, turning off my car's headlights and getting ready to leave, when I noticed someone standing outside my window. I screamed my soul out, then realized there were at least 4 people standing outside my car, one at each window. They all had masks, covering their faces. I was surrounded. One of them yelled at me to get out of the car. I didn't know if they had a gun or not, but I knew that if they did, by the time I turned on the car and tried to drive away on 4 flats, I'd already be dead. I yelled through the window, asking if they were just looking to rob me. One of them said if I gave them everything I had, they'd let me go. I agreed, unlocked the door, and as soon as I did, the guy outside my door opened it and forcefully pulled me out. I was beaten and kicked by at least 3 of them. They grabbed everything off of me, my smartwatch, my shoes, my wallet, my phone, and even some things out of my car's glove compartment. I was left lying on the ground as the group ran off into the darkness. I must have blacked out because the next thing I remember is waking up, probably half an hour later, still lying next to my car. They had stolen even my keys. I managed to get up and navigate myself to the nearest light source I could find, which was a small house up the street closer to the main road. I rang the bell a few times until someone answered through the door. I explained that I had been robbed and injured and needed to use their phone. Luckily, the woman inside was willing to help, and let me call the police. I also called roadside assistance to have my car towed and finally called my dad. After the police arrived, they took me back to my car and did a short investigation, taking as much information as I could give. After my car was towed, my dad came to pick me up and bring me home. The last location of my phone was recorded just down the street from where it all happened, but it hadn't been turned on since the night before, meaning they had probably destroyed it. The next day, I gave more information to the detectives regarding my Uber Eats account. They were able to trace the customer account back to a guy named Logan, who had allegedly lost his phone and wallet. Whoever found or stole them was the one who used his account to set up the robbery. So basically, whoever did this to me got away with it. The house they set this up at was a vacant one for sale. My car tires were covered by insurance, but I ate the loss on everything else. It was a painful and expensive, but also valuable lesson to not be so naive again. I stopped doing deliveries for a few months, but eventually I went back to doing daytime deliveries only. I had some spare time that night, and after chugging a few coffees earlier in the day, I figured I'd use the energy to go out and make some money. I was delivering for DoorDash, cruising on the highway to my next delivery. It was super late, the roads were empty, and the night was very peaceful. Basically every delivery driver's dream. While on my way, my phone started buzzing. It was the customer calling me, but before I had a chance to answer, they hung up. Since it only rang for a couple of seconds, I thought it must have been an accident. Just in case, I redialed their number. It rang for a while, but they didn't answer. I shook my head and blew it off, not thinking about it for the rest of the drive. I got off the highway and drove into the neighborhood. It was a very typical street with average houses. When I arrived at the house my delivery was for, I parked right in the driveway and started walking up to the porch. As I was setting down the bag, I noticed the front door was slightly cracked open. I wasn't sure if it was intentional, so I lightly knocked on the door and called out that I was dropping off their food. As soon as I did, I heard a somewhat disturbing sound coming from down the hallway. It was a muffled thump, almost mimicking my knocking like someone was banging on a door. Feeling a bit shaken, I opened the front door a bit wider and called out again. I wasn't sure what to say, so I just repeated that I was delivering their food. A few quiet moments went by, and then I heard a door open from the back of the house. A man came around the corner. He looked distressed and bothered, but I couldn't tell if it was because of me or something else. The guy walked down the hall and right up to the doorway where I stood, not saying a word as he started to reach for the bag. That's when I heard those thumps again from down the hallway. I looked past him in confusion, and he turned to look as well before quickly turning back to me, clearly recognizing that I had heard it too. "Is everything okay?" I asked cautiously. The sound echoed through the walls again, and the man just stared at me as if he were trying to decide what to do next. "Why don't you bring the food inside for me?" he said, almost in a demanding tone. Nervously, I picked up the bag but quickly realized how terrible of an idea this was. I felt threatened, like I had to follow him. But I also had a gut feeling that if I did, I wouldn't make it out of there. In my hesitation, the guy's face grew more bothered, angry even. He then reached out, grabbed the food right from my hands, and slammed the door in my face. Stunned, I stood there and listened as his footsteps went down the hallway. The thumping had stopped. I didn't know what else to do, so I hurried off the porch and got back into my car. I ended my DoorDash shift after that delivery and ended up reporting the disturbing scenario to the police. I think what ultimately made me report it was the fact that the man had tried to get me to go inside his house. If not for that, I might not have felt there was enough evidence to do anything. Unfortunately, the police informed me hours later that the man denied anyone else being in the house and declined their request to search it. At that point, there was nothing left to do but speculate. I truly believe something horrible was going on, and that he might have been ready to do the same thing to me, but I don't think we'll ever know for sure. My roommate, who is male, and I, a female, lived in a small duplex house less than a block from the university. Our street was always busy with cars and people walking to and from campus day and night. Although the town is small, the area where we live, which includes the college, is often considered the bad part of town, likely because it's older and has more modest homes. There were a few homeless people around, but I got to know most of them when I worked at a fast food place, so I was familiar with the people who were thought to be shady in town. Before this situation, I had never felt unsafe in the 6 years I lived there. I often walked to work and school since I didn't have a car, and I have a lot of anxiety about driving. About 9 or 10 months ago, I was sitting in my living room around 10 p.m., relaxing and watching TV. My roommate was in his bedroom playing video games, as he usually did in the evenings. Earlier, I had ordered some pizza for dinner, but when it arrived, part of my order was missing. So I called the pizza place to ask about the missing items, and they apologized, saying someone would be coming soon to deliver the rest of my order. While I was sitting in the living room, someone knocked very loudly on my door. It startled me, but I thought it was the pizza delivery person since I was expecting them. So I went to answer the door. I should also mention that there was no peephole, and I couldn't see who was outside from the window in the living room, so the only option was to open the door. When I opened the door, there was a middle-aged man I didn't recognize standing on my porch. He was wearing a big puffy jacket, a black beanie, and large, heavy boots. It was dark, so I couldn't see his face clearly, and I was very shocked and confused. I said, "Hello?" He took a small step back and asked, "Hey, is your husband home?" I was so confused that I didn't really think about my answer, so I said, "No." Then he said, "Oh, well, can you come outside and help me with something real quick?" That made me feel like I should get away from the situation. I told him to wait, closed and locked the door, and went to get my roommate. I explained what had happened, and he went outside to check, but the man had completely disappeared. It had been less than 5 minutes since I closed the door and went to get my roommate, so the man must have either run away quickly or left in a car. I felt a bit crazy because I was the only one who saw him, and my roommate hadn't seen him at all. He told me that I shouldn't answer the door late at night unless I knew who it was. I was really shaken up after this incident, so I called my boyfriend, crying, and told him what happened. He came over to make sure I was okay. Things went back to normal, but I was still very careful at night because I didn't want anything like that to happen again. Fast forward to mid-February, it was around 8 p.m., and I was sitting in my living room watching TV. I might have been waiting for food delivery again, but I don't remember for sure. Someone knocked loudly on my door once again. I was startled, but I went to answer it. When I opened the door, I was almost sure it was the same man from before wearing the same clothes. He started asking if my husband was home, and I quickly slammed the door in his face, locked it, and got my roommate. By the time my roommate went outside, the man was gone again. At this point, I was absolutely terrified. The first time seemed like a fluke, just some weird person at my door. But when it happened again, I was really scared. My roommate and I debated whether to call the police, and I finally decided to do it. I called the non-emergency line, reported what happened, and a police officer came to my house. They took a description of the man and said they would keep an eye out for him. The officer asked me if I noticed anything specific about the man, like if he was hiding anything in his hand or if there was another car nearby, but I didn't see anything like that. I left a note in my neighbor's mailbox to warn her because I knew there was a girl around my age living there, and I wanted to make sure she was safe. Nothing like that happened again before I moved out, but it really stayed with me and still makes me nervous today. Now I'm very careful whenever I leave my house, even during the day.